This is round number 4. Played December 22nd, 1959, there in New York. Arnold Sheldon Denker, was born in New York, February 21st, 1914. He actually was a good boxer, but his true love turned out to be chess. He won the Manhattan Chess Club Championship 6 different times, 1940, 44, 50, 50, and 51, the 1954 edition, and the 69-70 edition. Denker was United States chess champion in both 1944 and 1946. Denker would become an important organizer of chess here in the United States. In 2004, he was dubbed the Dean of American Chess. Arnold Denker passed away January 2nd, 2005. He was an international master at the time of this game, later became a grandmaster. Starting the game with d4 and knight f6, of course. Pawn c4, and now pawn to e6, an East Indian defense. Knight f3 here, anti-Nimzo Indian. The Nimzo Indian emerges after the knight comes to the c3 square, and then the bishop comes here to the b4 square. That's your Nimzo Indian defense, highlighted here. The knight f3 is the anti-Nimzo Indian. d5 is played, which transposes, doesn't it, to a Queen's Gambit declined. We saw this last week as well, did we not? Now knight c3 is played, so we transpose to an Anglo-Indian Queen's Knight variation, and now bishop b4. Rogozin's defense back in the Queen's Gambit declined line. Bishop g5 pins the knight to the queen, doesn't it? And we immediately chase that bishop or put the question with pawn h6. That question is answered with a trade, bishop for the knight. Bishop takes f6, and the queen capturing the bishop. Now c takes d5, and e takes d5. Denker leaving the book here, and there are several book lines that he could have played, but he played rook c1. Now you see here, according to this, Queen a4 is the best move. We have to look here now to find the best move. I don't know why they took the arrows off. The book move, well, you saw the best move was Queen a4. There is a book line that includes Queen a4. Let me show you that line first. There's also a book line that includes Queen to the b3 square. I'll show you both lines. There are actually 2 lines with Queen b3 that I can show. But on the Queen a4 line, and that's check, so that's answered by knight to c6. That's a book move. Pawn e3. We'll castle here. Bishop to e2. Bishop e6. Then white castles. Here pawn a6 is played. And now a rook comes to c1, but not the queen's rook. The king's rook comes to c1. The bishop from b4 is retreated to d6, and the queen is retreated to d1, and black plays knight to e7. That's the book line involving Queen a4. Let's go back here. There are a couple of lines that can be played with the queen to b3. Let me show both of those lines as well. So on queen b3, black will play c5, e3 here, or a3. We'll show the a3 line here in a moment. But castles, d takes c5, removing the defender of the bishop. But now that also opens this diagonal, so bishop takes the knight, queen takes the bishop, and on queen takes the queen, pawn takes the queen. I'll show you a few more moves that are not included in the ECO, but the most common continuation from here is knight d7, rook d1, knight takes c5, rook takes d5, pawn b6, defending the knight and preparing bishop b7. The rook comes back to d4, and then the bishop changes his mind and comes to e6. So that's the queen b3 with pawn e3 line. There's also queen b3 with the pawn a3 line. And this is the last line I will show in this game. Maestro wants to know, why didn't he take that d5 with the queen? I'll go back to that in a moment, but let's show the a3 line with queen b3. Again, we're going to bishop takes the pawn here, check. Queen takes the bishop again. And here the most common continuation is knight to d7, e3, castles, bishop e2, pawn b6, castles, and bishop b7. So several lines for your educational benefit. Chess Maestro wants to know, why didn't he take d5 with the queen? At what juncture? This d5 here, you mean? Is that what we're asking? I'm gathering you mean after c5. Why doesn't he capture here, right? That's what you want to know? I'm going to go ahead and attack the pinned piece. No, you've got this then. Yeah, I can't play here because of the check. But, I mean, I could just castle, couldn't I? It says knight c6. Ah, knight c6. Okay, knight c6. Yeah, sure. Interpose the check before it's played. And now this is a threat. Okay, now, those are all the alternate lines. Denker played rook c1. This is Denker's choice. Could the queen then check on e4? Coming back to that line, Valerie is asking, after the knight... let me see here, what line are we in? Oh, this is it. Queen b3 line, c5. And you want to know after the knight comes here, can the queen come to e4 and check? Yeah, well, he could go to here and then I'll play here, right? And if you fork here, I will go ahead and win the game. And you have lost the game. It gets bad, 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 all the way bad. All right, coming back now to the actual move that was played. Denker playing the rook to c1. Bobby goes ahead and castles here. Now pawn a3. Hits my bishop. Bishop takes the knight. Earning an exclam. Rook takes the bishop here. Pawn to c6. Securing the center. And in these lines, you say, doesn't your knight like to go there? Yes, but you can play knight a6, knight c7, or you can simply bring your knight to d7 after you bring your bishop out somewhere. After c6, now e3 is played, discouraging knight a6. So Fischer with pawn a5, re-enabling knight a6 because it's defended by the rook. Bishop to d3. More common in this position here is bishop to e2. See what the bot thinks about that. Gives it a thumbs up. This bishop e2 was pioneered at the 1952 Moscow Championship by Viktor Lublinsky against Yakov Yeshtrin. In this game, bishop d3. Bishop g4 from Bobby Fischer, pinning the knight to the queen. Pawn h3 immediately questioning his existence. Bishop h5 maintains the pin and is awarded a question mark. The bot calling for bishop takes f3, but I thought bishop f5 can be played here and should be played. It puts the question to his counterpart, and I get a star for this. Bobby with bishop h5. Here g4 is played, marked with a big red X. White should try queen b3 first. Queen b3, and then, say I play queen e7, now g4 can be played. Gives me a check mark, says knight h4 is best. Really? Denker with g4 straight away, bishop g6 now, knight e5, and that precludes my knight from coming to the d7 square, doesn't it? So, quite a move. Bishop takes bishop, hopes to decoy the knight back there, but of course, Denker captures with the queen. Queen e7 now defends the d7 square, facilitating knight d7. Queen f5 takes advantage of the absence of my queen from the f6 square, and now rook d8. The queen, of course, creating a super attack against d7. I need another piece to defend d7, so that, once again, knight d7 can, in fact, be played. Rook g1 is played here, lining up with the king, and finally, knight d7. Now, the move indicated by rook g1 is to push the pawn, but instead, Denker traded knights, and that is not liked much by the bot. If we instead play g5, the idea now is I've got dual threats, don't I? I can capture this pawn, discovering a pin, and it can't be captured back. That would create a super attack against the g-man, or perhaps even g6 can be played, super attacking that f-man. I personally prefer the idea of g takes h6. If black plays knight takes knight, white doesn't have to be in any hurry. He can simply capture with the pawn and save this move for later. Instead, Arnold Denker trading the knight off on the d7 square. That's captured with the rook. Now g5 is played, and rook d6. On h4 here, queen g4 is best, says our information panel up here. So, yeah, queen g4 forms that battery. Play that first, and then play the pawn to the h4 square on the subsequent turn. For example, play rook g6 here, I think. Oh, it says I'm inaccurate. Queen takes g5. Really? Anyway, my point is h4 is coming next. Well, I have not had the best results on my sidelines today. Well, h4 was played, and Bobby plays h5. King e2, no doubt wanting to double his rooks on the c file. Now g6 hits the queen. It gets a check mark, and rook e6 recommended. Rook e6, definitely an interesting move. On g6, hitting the queen, and the queen moves to the f3 square. Queen f4 is the best move, apparently. Yeah, well, I mean, it does have more scope on f4, doesn't it? More squares to access from here, I suppose, is the point. Whereas on f3, it is really blunted by these three pawns. Denker playing queen f3. Rook e6 here is now played, and king d2, getting out of the rook's line of fire. Rook e4 attacking the h-man. Denker played queen h3, defending. Queen c7 from Bobby Fischer, getting an inaccuracy. A4 being called for? Really? I would think that rook e8 would deserve consideration. Okay, that does cover the b3 square, doesn't it? And then you still can't push your pawn to the b4 square because I can take en passant. So bot calling for a4. Let's put the bot move up there and then put my move a4. The move I had in mind was rook e8, getting that triple battery. See what the bot thinks about this move. I get a thumbs up for this move. Definitely deserves considering. Well, Bobby with the queen to c7. Now the rook g to c1. We expected this move as soon as the king moved to e2. Inaccurate, says the bot. Okay, the bot calling for king c1. Get your king to safety first, says fickle bot. I think you can also play the queen to g3 and put the question to the black queen. I get a thumbs up for this idea. No doubt black will avoid the trade and move back to the e7 square star, and white no doubt will try to drive our rook out of the center of the board. Oh, I get an inaccuracy there. The bot saying just repeat the position. Well, you'll note the eval bar says negative 0.13, even though the evaluation here is negative 1.51 right there. So Denker with rook g1 to c1, and Bobby with queen's rook to e8. Now pawn f3 says, get out of my house. Now queen g3 being called for. That's what I said before, but it was inaccurate when I wanted to play it, but now the bot says it's the best move. Let me turn the table on the bot. You remember the bot said he should have played king c1 before? Well, if the bot's going to criticize me, I'm going to criticize the bot and say, okay, maybe king c2 would be a prudent move here. See what the bot says. I get a thumbs up. The idea is to tuck away on b1. So let's say rook g4. I'm going to play king b1. And the king is safe and sound, isn't it? f3 played by Arnie. Now rook 4 to e6, and Denker rook e1. Inaccurate. f4 was preferable, with f5 looming. Arnold Denker with rook e1, Bobby pawn b6, preparing pawn c5, no doubt. King c2 is now played, and again f4, followed by f5, is going to be in the sights of the bot. Instead, king c2 from Arnold Denker, and pawn c5 as predicted. Now there's a big threat here, isn't there, to take. The point is, if I can rook takes pawn, and rook takes rook, and rook takes rook, and then rook takes rook, pawn takes pawn is a discovered check, forking the two squares. So, in other words, the check can't be interposed without me capturing with the pawn. So there's a threat of rook takes the pawn here. So d takes c5 was played. Did I mention that f4 would be a good move? Let me play the move that was made. D takes c5. That's inaccurate. The bot is, in fact, calling for f4 here as well. No surprise. Bot calling for f4, which adds another defender to e3, by the way. But let's say he plays something horrific like here. Well, that's where rook takes rook can be played. Oh, exclam. Oh, I love getting double exclams. And if you take here, I'm going to take here, you're going to take here, and here's that discovered check I was talking about, forking the e3 and c3 squares, meaning that you can't interpose with your rook. Well, you can, but you're still losing your rook. And I've got an advantage. So that, I'm glad I decided to show that because I like getting double exclams. It's about time, right? Well, D takes C5 was Denker's choice. F4, the bot's choice, and my choice. But the bot is more of an authority than I am. D4 here. C takes B6. Queen takes the B6. And that eval bar is in the decisive zone for Bobby Fischer. Rook D3, Rook B8, battery attacking the B-man. So pawn B3. Rook C6, Checosaurus Rex, King B2, Rook C3, Rook takes Rook, and you'll note the eval bar. Well, it was pegged a moment ago. A moment ago, the eval bar was pegged. It had seen a mate, so it must have found a refutation to the mate. Pawn takes the Rook is check. King takes the pawn. Inaccurate. King A1. That's how bad you are. Well, now the eval bar is pegged. It says mate in 9. Mate in 9 moves, at most. Queen takes the pawn on B3. King to D2, Queen to A2 check, King to D3, Rook to D8, King to E4, Queen to C4 check, King to E5, Rook to D5 check. And here White resigned. The eval bar calling mate in 3. There's actually quite a few ways to do it. His only legal move here is King to F6. And, okay, there's a few ways to get mate in 3. We can try Queen C3 check. That forces King to E7. Then Queen E5 check, and that is going to force his queen to interpose, and this is checkmate. That's one way. You could also play Queen C6 or Queen A6. It's the same either way. They're both the same check, just one from 2 squares further away. The continuation is the same either way, because King E7 is going to be answered by Queen D6. Whether it came from A6 or C6 is irrelevant. And after King E8, Queen D8 is mate. Queen F8's also mate, isn't it? Take your pick of checkmates. Then also, you can do a more quiet approach. If you want to get cute, you can play Queen C7 here, because that threatens checkmate both at the D8 square and the E5 square. If this were the position, it would be checkmate, and if this were the position, it would be checkmate. So the only thing he could do is once again offer up his queen. We're not actually going to take the queen. We're going to play Queen D8. Forcing him to interpose the queen, but now checkmate. So a lot of ways to win. Denker didn't care for any of the 3, so he resigned. 94.3 accuracy for Bobby Fischer, 80.3 accuracy for Arnold Denker. Individual game rating for Bobby was 2,900.